Hey guys, it's Medicosis Perfectionalis, where medicine makes perfect sense. Let's continue our physiology playlist. Today it's time for the action potential. When your membrane potential has experienced action. What kind of action are you talking about? Sodium influx. Sodium rushes in. Sodium is positive. The inside of the membrane will become positive. So during rest, the inside was more negative. But during the action potential, more sodium comes in and the inside becomes more positive. We call this reversal of polarity, #depolarization. This is the physiology playlist. Please watch these videos in order. Let's answer the question of the previous video, shall we? And the question went like this. Sodium channels have two gates, but the gated potassium channels have only one gate. Why is this? Second, voltage-gated sodium channels are fast. However, voltage-gated potassium channels are slow. What is the cause? Surprise, surprise. The reason why sodium channels are fast is because they have two gates. And the reason why potassium channels are slow is because they have just one gate. I don't get it. Let me explain. Remember that sodium is more prevalent in the extracellular fluid, but potassium is more prevalent in the intracellular fluid. The sodium channel has two gates, the potassium channel has just one gate, which is the exact distinction as between the modern revolving door and the good old door. Why do you think modern office buildings have revolving doors instead of the good old door? Oh yeah, because they are more aesthetically pleasing. What are you, a woke artist? No, revolving doors are more efficient. Here is the deal. Here is your sodium channel with two gates, and here's your potassium channel with just one gate. And I will give each channel 2 seconds in order to respond and act. Let's start by you, sodium channel, aka the revolving door. Alright, so under resting conditions, I'm closed. If you give me 1 second, after 1 second, I will rotate by about 45 degrees. So this part right here will go up like this, 45 degrees, wonderful. And this leg will go up there, 45 degrees, and the end result will be like this. Oh, hey, by the way, let me introduce myself. My name is Sodium. I am more prevalent on the outside, so I'll just get a chance to enter. Thank you so much. If you give me another second, I will rotate another 45 degrees. This arm will go this way, and this arm will go this way. And now I'm closed. So in the beginning I was closed, then I opened, then I closed again. Contrast that with the good old potassium channel with just one gate. If you give me 1 second, give me my 45 degrees, and I will go from here to here. This is after 1 second. And then another second, I'll go from here to here. Okay. Let me introduce myself. By the way, my name is Potassium. I am more prevalent inside the cell. Therefore, when you open the gate for me, it's time for me to go out because the concentration of potassium inside is higher than that of the potassium outside. And the end result is potassium efflux. Potassium is leaving. Notice that after 2 seconds, the sodium channel has opened and closed, but the potassium channel has only opened. If you want it to close, give it another 2 seconds. And that's why the sodium channel with two gates is way faster than the potassium channel with just one gate. It's the difference between the modern revolving door and the good old door. The modern revolving door can let in and out more people than the traditional door. Dadgummit, I should have become an engineer. This 1 second was just for illustrative purposes only. The actual number is 1/10,000th of a second, or about 0.1 millisecond. That's nothing. That sodium channel is super fast. There is another advantage to the modern revolving door, which is energy efficient. It prevents drafts. It prevents the loss of heating or cooling from the building. When I first came to the United States, I worked as a security guard. I loved those night shifts because they were like nothing was happening. I was just sitting on a desk studying cardiology while getting paid. That was a good deal. I have noticed something. In small buildings with good old doors, once an employee opens the door, and it happened to be cold outside, cold air will rush in, giving me hypothermia. In those cases, I was cussing at employees all the time. If another doofus employee comes here, I'm gonna lose it. But in modern buildings with revolving doors, I didn't even notice the freaking employee. I was busy trying to figure out why they called it pulsus paradoxus. Let's review Medicosis nuggets of medicine. Nugget number 1, why do you need action potential? Because action potential is life. Inside your body, the nerve impulse is unidirectional. The nerve impulse starts at the most excitable part of the nerve known as the axon hillock. Not to be confused with home equity line of credit. That's a banker's joke. Nugget number 4 is crucial. During rest, or the polarized state, or the resting membrane potential, the inside is more negative than the outside. However, upon activation, upon depolarization, sodium rushes in. Now the inside is more positive and the outside is more negative. Relatively speaking, we call this reversal of polarity or depolarization. Nugget number 5, local anesthetics affect type C fibers greater than type B fibers greater than type A fibers. Oh, by the way, please hit the notification bell because there is a huge announcement coming soon. Nugget number 6, you will be affected by hypoxia the most if you are very active, metabolically speaking, and far away from the artery. That's why type A fibers are the most affected by hypoxia. The combination of nuggets 5 and 6 will give you nugget number 7. Susceptibility to pressure and hypoxia affects type A fibers more than B more than C, but to local anesthetics it's the other way around. Because type C fibers are the thinnest, type A are the thickest. Nugget number 8, what is chronaxy? Chrono means time. Chronaxy, it's the time needed for a current whose intensity is double the real base to excite the freaking nerve. Why double the real base? Because you gotta counteract the skin resistance. Membrane potential comes in different shapes and forms. During rest, we call it the resting membrane potential. Upon stimulation, well, it depends. If you give me a sufficient stimulus known as a threshold, I will give you a robust action potential. But if it's sub-threshold, well, I follow the all or none law. I cannot give you an action potential. Sorry. I can only give you local response, which is nothing. During rest, you have potassium efflux, leaving the inside more negative. When a positive leaves, the inside becomes more negative. When you lose money, you're becoming more broke. This is during rest. Upon activation or depolarization, sodium rushes in. Sodium is positive. This will make the inner surface more positive, and this is called reversal of polarity. After the activation, let's go back to rest. So let's close these sodium channels and let's open potassium channels again. In this lecture, we will assume that we're talking about large nerve fibers with a resting membrane potential of -90. During rest, you're -90. What the flip does that mean? It means that the potential difference between the inside and the outside is 90. What does the negative mean? It means that the inside is more negative. Why? Because potassium is leaving and potassium is positive. When positive leaves you, it leaves you heartbroken. It leaves you negative. Next, upon depolarization, sodium rushes in. Sodium is positive, the inside becomes more positive, and the outside becomes more negative, relatively speaking. And we went from -90 inside to +35 on the inside. We care more about the inside, and that hence that charge. Now, enough with depolarization. We want to go back to rest. Sure, let's close these sodium channels and open potassium channels again. But these potassium channels are slow. They did not close early, so instead of just going to -90, we will overshoot until -100. And then you go from -100 up to -90. By simply kicking some of that potassium back in. Nugget number 10, during resting membrane potential, the inside is more negative. What causes that resting membrane potential? Two things. Selective permeability to potassium, and sodium, and then the sodium-potassium ATPase pump. What the flip is selective permeability? It means that the membrane is selectively permeable. No kidding. It means I get to choose, baby. If I want sodium to move, potassium to move, that's fine. If I want proteins not to move, it's up to me. During rest, the potassium efflux is about 100 times greater than the sodium influx. In other words, sodium influx is negligible. The only game in town is potassium leaving. Potassium is positive. When it leaves, the inside is left to be more negative. Nugget number 12 are the causes of the resting membrane potential. Let's talk about sodium-potassium ATPase. Sodium-potassium ATPase is a primary active transporter, which means you will need to spend money, you'll need to spend energy. Don't be a cheap bastard. During rest, potassium is leaving, sodium is entering. Which one is more important? Potassium. How did we know this? Nernst equation. Next, causes of resting membrane potential are the selective permeability and the sodium-potassium ATPase. How did we know which one is important? Mr. Goldman told us that the selective permeability is more important. Anytime you have sodium problems, hyponatremia or hypernatremia, you get CNS problems. Sodium CNS. Kalium problems, hyperkalemia, hypokalemia, you get cardiac muscle problems. Arrhythmia, baby. Nugget number 15 is the rule of fours. It's gonna save you hours throughout your career. Nugget number 16, the polarized state is caused by potassium efflux. You can say that the polarized attitude is the potassium abandoning the cell, leaving the cell. Now it's time to talk about depolarization. Types of electricity in general are electrons and ions. Electrons is how the electrical generator gets electricity to your house. These are electrons and these are super fast. However, electricity inside your body are caused by ions and these are not as fast. So let's get a source of electrons and deliver some electricity to your nerve and see what happens. This is during rest. Okay, you applied a stimulus to my nerve. Alright, what's gonna happen? I'm gonna get excited, and this is called depolarization, and then repolarization, and then hyperpolarization, and you go back to the resting membrane state, which was -90. We go from -90 all the way up to positive 35, and then back we overshoot to negative, let's say -100, and then back to -90. Resting membrane potential, depolarization, repolarization, hyperpolarization, resting potential. Therefore, components of the action potential are depolarization, repolarization, and hyperpolarization. Depolarization is the ascending limb, repolarization is the descending limb. Together they form a spike. This is the spike, and this is the spike duration, or the spike potential duration. It's about 2 milliseconds. Contrast that with the hyper, it takes a lot of time, 40 milliseconds. This is super active, but this is a lazy butt. What's the cause of the resting membrane potential? Two things: selective permeability, mostly to potassium, and the sodium-potassium pump. What causes depolarization? Sodium influx through the fast voltage-gated sodium channels. They have two gates, by the way. Remember the revolving doors. What causes repolarization? Well, yeah, shut up. First you close the sodium channels, and then you open the potassium channels, leading to potassium efflux. What causes hyperpolarization? The continuous potassium efflux, because these potassium channels are slow. They are slow to open, they are slow to close. What do you call the -90 millivolts resting membrane potential? How about the -65? This is the firing level. Before it, we had slow depolarization, slow uprising. But after it, boom, it's the spike, baby. Ascending, rapid depolarization. What's the difference between slow and fast? Why is this discrepancy? Because here you have opened some of the sodium channels, you get some sodium influx. But here you have opened all of your sodium channels, you get robust sodium influx. What should I call the zero? Isopotential. Iso means the same potential, which means there is no difference between the inside surface and the outside surface of the membrane. And this is the depolarized state. What's the magnitude of the entire action potential? Well, from -90 to 0, that's 90 millivolts. And then from 0 to 35, that's another 35 millivolts. 90 plus 35 equals 135. From here to here is the depolarization phase, from here to here is the repolarization phase, and from here to here is the hyperpolarization phase. It takes a lot of time because it's a lazy butt. What do you call this period, which is between the initiation of a stimulus and the actual response, which is the action potential? You call it the latent period. What do you call the period between an infectious organism entering my body and me suffering symptoms? The latent period. Medicine makes so much sense once you understand what the flip you're talking about. Can you define action potential for me? Sure, it's the rapid, spike, baby. Rapid changes in the membrane potential following stimulation by a threshold, not subthreshold, no, threshold stimulus, which is a stimulus strong enough to cause an action potential. What causes the slow depolarization? Opening of some sodium channels, which triggers a positive feedback. Some sodium channel opens and then others will open, which triggers other sodium channels to open, and they help each other in a positive feedback loop until all of them open and you get the spike, rapid depolarization, when all of the sodium channels are open. Do you remember the LH surge of ovulation? Yeah, we had FSH and estrogen. FSH increase estrogen, estrogen increase FSH. They increase each other in a beautiful positive feedback loop until boom, you reach this firing level, and it was called the LH surge afterwards. After you give a stimulus, there is an artifact here. What's the cause of this artifact? Remember, we have two different types of electricity. We have one type caused by electrons and another type caused by ions. You give one from a battery, from an outside source. This is electron. This is so fast. So even before the nerve starts to respond, you get the artifact because this is electrons. After that, the ions will start to move and you will actually get the action potential. So this discrepancy is because there is discrepancy between the speed of an electricity caused by electrons and that caused by ions. Resting membrane potential, depolarization, repolarization, we overshoot, hyperpolarization, go back to normal. Repolarization, what caused you? Well, closure of the sodium channels, and then you open the potassium channels into potassium efflux. And I have rapid repolarization, and then it gets slower afterwards. What causes hyperpolarization? The continuous potassium efflux, because these potassium channels are slow to close. How do I get from hyperpolarization back to the resting membrane potential? You gotta dish some potassium into the cell through the inward rectifying potassium channels. Please get a blank piece of paper and draw everything here. Otherwise, there is no hope for you. I'm just kidding. Resting membrane potential is caused by selective permeability, potassium leaving the cell, and the sodium-potassium ATPase pump. Depolarization is caused by sodium influx. Repolarization is caused by potassium efflux. Hyperpolarization is caused by the continuous potassium influx, and then you go back to the resting membrane potential by dishing some potassium back in through the inward rectifying potassium channels. How is that hard? Resting membrane potential, potassium is leaving, thank you. Depolarization, sodium is entering. You get the up spike. Then you get the repolarization, this is the downward spike. And then you overshoot, hyperpolarization. And then you gotta dish some potassium back in to reach the resting membrane potential, and this is the inward rectifying potassium channel. Please note that we have two types of potassium channels, non-gated and gated. The non-gated potassium channels are called the leaky, inward rectifier potassium channels. How about the gated? We call them slow-acting, voltage-gated potassium channel, and remember they have one gate. They are the old traditional door. What are the functions of the leaky inward rectifying potassium channels? Okay, it lets the potassium out during the resting membrane potential. This is called potassium efflux. But hey, medicosis, I object. We should have called it the outward rectifying potassium channel. Shut up, let me finish. The second function is that it returns the membrane from hyperpolarization back to the resting membrane potential, from the negative 100 to the negative 90. And this is potassium going in. This takes longer than this. So if you are a scientist and you are observing a neuron, most of the time you will find it in this state. You will see potassium entering the cell. It takes 40 minutes. That's a lot of time. It's a lazy butt. So you will call it inward, not outward. Why? Because it takes lots of time to enter. Most of the time when you see the neuron, there is potassium entering into the cell, hence inward rectifying potassium channels. And they are leaky because they are non-gated. Contrast that with the voltage-gated potassium channel. It's responsible for repolarization and hyperpolarization and the overshoot because it's slow to open, slow to close. This voltage-gated potassium channel with one door is slow. Slow at opening, slow at closing. Slow at opening, that's why repolarization starts after depolarization. If you remember, depolarization happens first and then repolarization later. Why is this? Because it is slow at opening. There is something else that's more subtle. If you notice depolarization, the up spike was like this. But the down spike took longer. Oh, it was smooth like this. So if you draw a midline, like this one, you will see that the depolarization took a shorter period of time. Why is this? Why is depolarization faster? Well, because the sodium channels were faster because it's a revolving door with two gates, but potassium channels are slower. It takes longer. This thinking channel is also slow at closing, and that's why we overshoot. That's why potassium efflux continues past the 90 millivolts until we reach negative 100, and then we gotta bring it back to negative 90 through another channel known as the inward rectifying. Question of the day. By the way, previous questions are in previous videos in this playlist called Physiology. So here is a robust battery connected to an electrode to give you a stimulus. And then there is another electrode to measure the action potential. You have noticed that in this experiment, the distance between the stimulus and the recording electrode is about 70 millimeters. Next, when you recorded the action potential, you have noticed that the distance between point A and point B is about 7 milliseconds. Question is, what's the likely type of this nerve fiber? Is it type A, type B, or type C? Or, hey, Medicosis says, is this even answerable? Yes, indeed. Try to think. Let me know the answer in the comment section. You'll find the correct answer in the next video. If you like this video, check out my acid-based course on my website medicosisperfectionalis.com. I also have a CNS pharmacology course, autonomic pharmacology course, antibiotics course, and others. It's medicosisperfectionalis.com. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, hit the bell, and click on the join button. You can support me here or here. Go to my website to download my courses. Go to Picmonic for some doozy medical mnemonics. Thank you for watching. As always, be safe, stay happy, study hard. This is Medicosis Perfectionalis, where medicine makes perfect sense.